Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Over the last 2 episodes, we pushed the civilizational geometry thesis a long way. We saw the 3 postures that the 3 original level civilizations took toward nature. We saw that Western science, from its very beginning, was about cutting. Chinese thought, from its very beginning, refused to cut. We said that the difference between these 2 methods can be traced to somewhere deeper than culture, back to the geometry of vowels itself. But today, I want to take this argument to a place no one expects. I want to bring you into the very heart of 20th century physics. There, I will point out something almost no one has said openly, but anyone who looks carefully will see. The deepest physics breakthroughs of the second half of the 20th century quietly, unconsciously, almost forced by experimental fact, shifted away from Greek geometry and toward Chinese geometry. And the person who completed the most critical turn happened to come from China. His name is Zhenning. And his theory, gauge field theory, is essentially the modern mathematical expression of qi. This is what today's episode is about. First, let's clarify what gauge field theory is, using only language, no mathematical formulas. Newton told us, the universe contains particles, and between particles there are forces, such as universal gravitation. This is the Greek picture: first come substances, particles, then the relationships between substances, forces. Einstein's theory of relativity changed half the picture. Spacetime itself is not a passive background, spacetime is bent by mass. But he still retained the basic picture of particles plus forces. The framework was not yet fundamentally overturned. By the 1950s, physics began encountering a new problem. Forces at the quantum level could not be described by attraction or repulsion between particles. The electromagnetic field doesn't travel from one point to another, the field itself fills all of space, particles are just local vibrations of this field. In 1954, Young and Mills published a paper establishing what we now call Young-Mills theory, non-abelian gauge field theory. The fundamental unit of the world is not the particle. The fundamental unit of the world is the field. And particles are simply local excitations of the field at a given location. This statement sounds simple, but if you think it through clearly, you will find that it replaces the Greek worldview at its very root. Let me put it in the plainest possible words: what exactly is a field in gauge field theory, and what makes it so unusual? The electromagnetic field itself fills the entire space. It is not something moving from one point to another. At every single point in the universe, no matter where, the field has a value. Particles are merely the field's vibrations in local regions. Second, the field is continuous. From one point to the next, the field's value changes smoothly, with no breaks, no gaps, no discontinuities. There is no gap between fields, no void where the field does not reach. The universe leaves no blank spaces. Third, the field is relational. The value at any single point depends on the values of all surrounding points. You cannot isolate a single point and ask for its value alone, that value is determined together with every other point in the field. Fourth, the field is indivisible. You cannot cut out a piece of the field to study. The moment you cut it, it is no longer a field. Wholeness is not a property of the field, it is the very essence of the field. A field that can be divided is no field at all. Now let us list these 4 characteristics together: pervasive, continuous, relational, and indivisible. Now think about qi, that concept from Chinese philosophy said to permeate all of existence. Qi is pervasive, it fills all space. Qi is continuous, it has no breaks or gaps. Qi is relational, qi at any location depends on its surroundings. Qi is indivisible, you cannot cut out a piece of qi. These 4 characteristics match, point for point, word for word. Gauge field theory and the theory of qi meet here at profound depth. Some might say this is only surface-level resemblance. Let me push this further, much deeper. The true core of gauge field theory is a principle called local gauge invariance. At every point in spacetime, you may perform a local transformation, change some property at that point. Yet the overall form of the theory must remain unchanged. Local change is permitted, but global symmetry must not be broken. Local freedom and global invariance must hold simultaneously. This is a remarkably strange cognitive posture. It demands that you see both the local and the global simultaneously. It requires you to simultaneously accept both change and constancy, and to hold the many and the one at the same time. If you see only the local, you are lost in endless change. If you see only the global, you lose all concrete phenomena. You must see both at once, and see that they are two sides of the same thing. I want to ask you, what kind of thinking is this? This is yin-yang thinking. The Taiji symbol captures exactly this: yin within yang, yang within yin, perpetually changing, yet always maintaining a perfect symmetry as a whole. Neo-Confucianism's concept of one principle, many manifestations, one single Li, yet appearing differently across all things, multiplicity never diminishing unity. For 2,500 years, Chinese philosophy has been expressing the same core insight: change within wholeness, wholeness within change. And gauge field theory, for the very first time, translated this ancient insight into precise mathematical equations. Yang Zhenning did not invent a new way of thinking. He gave precise mathematical expression, for the very first time, to an ancient one. Gauge theory is the foundation of the entire Standard Model, the theory that describes all known fundamental particles and their interactions throughout the universe. Electromagnetic interaction, weak interaction, strong interaction, all three fundamental forces are described by gauge field theory. For the past 70 years, every deepest understanding that physics has achieved about the universe has been built upon gauge field theory. Without gauge theory, there is no Standard Model. Without the Standard Model, there is no modern particle physics. The core of gauge theory, relations take priority over substance, is a thought that Greek geometry could never have naturally generated on its own. Greek geometry always begins from substance. What are the particles? What are the forces? And only then constructs the relations between them. Yang Zhenning reversed this entirely, beginning from symmetry, from relation itself, letting particles emerge naturally as local expressions of that relation. From the I Ching to the Tao Te Ching to the Avatamsaka Sutra, this ancient instinct has now dressed itself in the precise language of mathematics. Now let us look to the other side, string theory. Another grand attempt of physics in the second half of the 20th century. String theory's goal is to unify all fundamental forces. What is its core insight, stated in the plainest possible terms? All fundamental particles in the universe are not truly point particles. They are infinitesimally small, one-dimensional strings, vibrating. Different modes of vibration produce different particles. The electron is one vibration, the photon another, the quark yet a third. It sounds elegant. But look carefully at one thing: what is the fundamental move of string theory? What is it actually doing? It is searching for something smaller than particles, more fundamental, indivisible. It keeps cutting. It keeps reducing. The logic remains Greek: find the ultimate, smallest building block from which everything else can be derived. This time, the building block changed from a point to a string. But the deepest instinct remained entirely unchanged. From Democritus in the 5th century BC to string theorists of the 21st century, the Greek habit of mind has not changed by a single word. The world must be reducible to the smallest, geometrized fundamental unit. String theory is the purest continuation of Greek atomism in the 21st century. Gauge field theory, relations take priority over entities. String theory, entities still take priority over relations. Two fundamentally different physical intuitions. Wholeness is the field's essence, not the field's property. Gauge field theory begins from one, a unified field from which all things differentiate. String theory begins from the many, countless individual strings scattered across the cosmos, combining to form the universe. The parts come first, the whole emerges after. Whole before part, or part before whole, these two instincts correspond to the geometric intuitions of two entirely different civilizations. And the most impossible fact to ignore, the man who proposed gauge field theory has the surname Yang. Those who developed string theory were almost entirely Western physicists, Veneziano, Susskind, Witten. The lineage is unmistakably Greek. Nambu Yoichiro was Japanese, but his work belongs strictly to the Greek tradition of reduction, not to the Eastern holistic view. I am saying something deeper. The geometric intuition of the language you grow up speaking unconsciously shapes your aesthetic sense in physics. Yang grew up in Hefei. His father was among China's first generation of mathematics professors. He studied at Southwest Associated University before going to America in his early 20s. By then, his fundamental way of thinking about the world had already been deeply shaped by the geometry of the Chinese language. He later mastered Western mathematics, acquiring all the tools of Greek precision. But when facing quantum field theory, his intuition remained Chinese. He sought relational structure and symmetry, that elegance where local and whole hold true simultaneously. This is the core aesthetic of Chinese geometry across 2,500 years. Now lay out these four features: pervasive, continuous, relational, uncuttable. Then think about what qi is. Four features, mapping one-to-one. Word for word. The true core of gauge field theory is not just the concept of the field. Its true core is a principle called local gauge invariance. At every point in spacetime, you can perform a local transformation, but the overall form of the theory must remain unchanged. The freedom of the local and the invariance of the whole must hold at the same time. This is a very strange cognitive posture. It requires you to see local and whole simultaneously. It requires you to acknowledge change and unchanged simultaneously. Let me be clear, this may be the most important part of this entire episode. Zhenning Yang himself, at the conscious level, held a critical attitude toward traditional Chinese science. In a 2004 lecture, he explicitly stated that the analogical thinking of the I Ching had blocked China from developing modern science. He believed China's lag in modern science was partly due to the holistic thinking of the I Ching, a claim that sparked considerable debate within China. But his greatest work in physics, gauge field theory, describes the world in precisely the relational mode he criticized: relationships over entities. This is precisely the deepest core of the very tradition he criticized, the I Ching, yin-yang, holistic thinking. The tradition he consciously opposed left its deepest imprint in the unconscious physical intuitions that guided his greatest work. This tells us, geometric habits are unconscious and deep, embedded in language, in the body, in the very patterns of thought. A person can consciously oppose a tradition, yet at the unconscious level still think entirely within that tradition's geometry. Yang's physics is the purest modern extension of a civilization's geometry, one he was almost unwilling to acknowledge. This is more persuasive than any public declaration of cultural pride. Because it is not a statement, it is structure. Structure is always the most honest proof. And structure never lies. All the deepest breakthroughs in physics in the second half of the 20th century were essentially a shift from entity-first to relation-first thinking. Not just Zhenning Yang alone, the entire discipline underwent this transformation. Let me give you a list. From general relativity to quantum entanglement, from gauge field theory to AD/CFT, every breakthrough rewrites entities as relationships. Einstein's general relativity: spacetime is not a passive container, it is geometric relationship produced by mass distribution. Gravity is not a force, it is relational structure. Quantum mechanics: a particle's state depends on measurement. The observer and the observed cannot be separated. Quantum entanglement: two particles exist as a single entangled whole, with no locally independent properties between them. Gauge field theory: particles are local excitations of fields. The relationship, the field, takes priority over the entity, the particle. Add/CFT duality, a gravitational theory in higher dimensional space is equivalent to a field theory in lower dimensions. Space itself may be a holographic projection of a relational network. ER equals EPR, quantum entanglement and wormholes may be the same thing. Entanglement is fundamentally the relational structure of spacetime itself. It requires you to hold many and one at the same time. If you see only local change, you get lost in the changes. If you see only the unchanging whole, you lose the concrete phenomena. You must see both at once, and see that they are two faces of the same thing. This is yin-yang thinking. The Taijutsu depicts exactly this, yang within yin within yang, forever changing, forever preserving the overall symmetry. The Neo-Confucian one principle, many manifestations says the same thing, there is only one principle, but it manifests in myriad ways, the manifestations do not harm the one, and the one does not dissolve the manifestations. Chinese philosophy has been expressing this for 2,500 years. And gauge field theory, for the first time, wrote it down as a mathematical equation. Zhenning Yang did not invent a new way of thinking. He gave precise expression, for the first time, to an ancient way of thinking. What is gauge field theory? It is the foundation of the entire Standard Model, the most fundamental theoretical framework through which modern physics describes the universe. All these theories are doing the same thing, removing entity from the foundational layer, and placing relation there instead. The entire 20th century of physics marks the first time Western science was forced by experimental facts to stand in the position of Eastern geometry. Most Western scientists did not realize this. Each time they solved a problem, they found the entity-first path impassable, and were forced to turn toward relation first. Once, and again, until they discovered that every one of the deepest theories was making the same turn. But Greek geometry did not surrender. Its final struggle has a name, string theory. String theory attempts to unify all of quantum field theory with general relativity, the most ambitious undertaking in all of theoretical physics. It is extraordinarily beautiful in mathematics, generating profound mathematical structures that have inspired revolutions across several fields. But after 70 years, 50 years of development followed by 20 years of criticism, not a single experimentally verifiable prediction has emerged. This is unprecedented in the history of physics. Every great theory, upon its arrival, immediately produced verifiable predictions. Only string theory, after 70 years, has produced no verifiable predictions. This stands alone in all of physics. Supporters argue, strings exist at the Planck scale, many orders of magnitude smaller than anything current experiments can possibly reach. But critics respond, a theory that cannot be falsified has ceased to be science, it has crossed into philosophy, or even theology. This predicament is precisely the sign of Greek geometry hitting its own limits, the cost of imposing an entity framework upon a relational universe. String theory tries to describe an inherently relational universe by searching for its smallest building blocks. The tool and the object are fundamentally mismatched. The more refined it becomes, the further from reality it drifts. The more mathematical, the more distant from experiment. A strange and troubling paradox. This is not to say string theory is wrong, mathematically, it may be correct. But the Greek cognitive stance may not be the right posture for understanding the deepest layers of the universe. Meanwhile, loop quantum gravity has been quietly walking another path, exploring the deep structure of the universe in an entirely different direction. The foremost representative of loop quantum gravity is Italian physicist Carlo Rovelli, a distinct and vital voice in contemporary theoretical physics. Its core claim, spacetime itself is not a continuous background, but a relational network woven from discrete quantum units. Spacetime is not a smooth, continuous backdrop, it is woven from a relational network called a spin network. The minimum unit of spacetime is not a point, it is a relationship. This is loop quantum gravity's most radical redefinition of reality. If you truly understand what this means, you will see, this is nothing less than a modern physics version of Chinese geometry, resonating across 2 millennia. Rovelli wrote a book called Reality is Not What It Seems, in which he extensively draws on the pre-Socratic tradition of holism. He especially invokes Anaximander, the great holistic thinker of ancient Greece, a thread of thought suppressed for 2,500 years beneath the tide of analytical philosophy. He is excavating the suppressed holistic thread within Greek civilization, trying to reconnect a line of thought that has been severed for 2,500 years. He proposed relational quantum mechanics, arguing that physical properties have no absolute existence in themselves, only relational existence relative to some reference frame. This is the modern physics expression of Huayan Buddhism's deepest insight: one is all, and all is one, Eastern philosophy and modern physics converging at last. The current landscape of physics has become clear: 3 competing programs, each representing a profoundly different philosophical tradition of geometry. It is looking for something smaller, more basic, more indivisible than the particle. It is still cutting. It is still reducing. Its logic is still Greek: find the ultimate, smallest, indivisible basic brick from which everything can be derived. From Democritus in the 5th century BCE, to string theorists in the 21st century, the Greek-style cognitive habit has not changed by a single word. Gauge field theory represents the quiet triumph of Eastern geometry. It has already become the foundation of the Standard Model, silently rewriting the map of physics. Loop quantum gravity represents the suppressed holistic thread of Greek civilization, now converging with Eastern geometry, 2 ancient rivers finally meeting. Most remarkably, Zhenning himself is openly skeptical of string theory. He has repeatedly declared in public that it contains more speculation than science, because it has yet to produce a single verifiable experimental prediction. I believe this is no coincidence. His physical intuition tells him, the path of string theory is an extension of the Greek mind, and not necessarily physics' true next step. The 20th century was the most glorious century of Western physics. It was also the century when the Western scientific methodology was pushed to its very limits by experimental reality. At this limit, something happened that almost no one states openly: physics was forced to begin thinking in the geometric language of the East. Not as a result of cultural exchange. Not through translation. But because Western scientists themselves, confronting ever deeper reality, found that the Greek instinct to cut no longer worked, and were driven, step by step, toward relationship first. And the most striking fact is, the person who proposed gauge field theory is surnamed Yang. These 2 instincts correspond to the geometries of 2 civilizations. Yang may not want to admit this. That is understandable. The Western Academy does not welcome such an interpretation. But structure does not lie. His physics is the modern mathematical expression of qi, the living field that underlies all things. This is the first victory of Chinese geometry at the very frontier of 21st century science, an ancient cosmology, proven through mathematics. And this victory has only just begun. The accumulated weight of history is quietly making itself known at the frontier of science. Next episode, we go deeper. We talk about the concept of precise definition itself. Why is the Greek method of a precise definition, as a philosophical methodology, now under siege from every direction? From Gödel's incompleteness theorem, to quantum ontological ambiguity, to Wittgenstein's self-refutation, to AI's disruption of symbolic logic, to the relational turn within mathematics itself. Precise definition as a cognitive method is, for the first time in 2,500 years, encountering its own structural limits. But I must also be honest, the Eastern tradition's embrace of imprecision carries its own real and serious costs that cannot be ignored. In the next episode, we make a genuine self-correction. Subscribe, and we'll see you there.